Dibal, come on. You launched the Brave Manual here 2016. It's actually in the Brave Manual.
It's in the Brave Manual,
It
actually.
is in the Brave Manual, yes. So there is Wakali.
For the benefit of the viewers who do not know what the Brave Manual is all about. Yeah.
Brave Manual, it's a resource guide and a toolkit that we worked on. We wrote on addressing violence and particularly violent extremism. And we launched at the time when violent extremism was really rising and radicalization of young people was rising in this country. And in that, we actually identified 18 gangs, and 5 of those were in Mombasa. Wakali Kwanza was one of those. Then there is Wakali Wao.
Wakali Wao.
In
so there's
Kisauni, there's Wakali Kwanza.
Wakali Kwanza.
Then there's Wakali Wao, both in Kisauni. And then I think they have also Wakali Wazee, Wakali Mzee, an older gang. These are gangs, and actually what they were doing in Mombasa, this was a revenge attack between 2 gangs. So Wakali Kwanza and a few other gangs in Mombasa.
Oh,
this problem has been there. These gangs are known, their parents are known, these kids are known. Their parents know their kids still around and kill other people and stab other people. So it's not something new at Dibal.
All right, since then you launched, not really, it's tipping off my tongue, launched the Brave Manual. What has been maybe the remedial measures that you've seen on the ground in terms of trying to, what sort of ideology they're operating on? What is really prompting them? Is it politically instigated? Or is it religiously also instigated?
Neither, Dibal. These gangs, they are not motivated by any ideology. They are not motivated by religion. They are not motivated by any political thinking. These are hoodlums. These are a bunch of young boys who I know some of them say that they don't have jobs. They don't have, there are many jobless Kenyans. They do not resort into stealing and killing and stabbing other people because they're jobless. These are young boys and girls. They are on drugs most of the time. They're thieves. They're criminals.
Yeah, criminals.
Yeah.
Right. Dr. Hassan Kanenja, good morning.
Good morning. On the same? Well, this phenomenon, of course, is not exclusive to Kisauni. We have clearly seen increasingly, of course, in varied capacities, a proliferation of some of these gangs in other parts of the country. In fact, I think the National Cohesion and Integration, they did a study last year actually looking at gang violence and just the proliferation of gangs in the country and the relationship it has, to other things, including extremism. And so I think it's something, of course, we have to pay attention to. A lot of times we dismiss them as some local disgruntled, youth, but increasingly they become a menace and they actually start disturbing the peace. Now, these groups, of course, people who are familiar and who've been working with communities and researching violence, they are aware of their existence. Of course, you just mentioned, when you heard about them, they're completely not new. People in the CVE space who are working in the coast, they're extremely familiar. It's not just those gangs, there are actually many, many more gangs, down there. And we should have a more, collective approach and comprehensive approach in addressing them. It's not just about the joblessness, there's so many other factors. But the trouble is, they only run wild when they're not confronted. At some point, you saw what Mungiki was doing until it had been reined in. Of course, certain approaches perhaps are not, are not some of the best measures in terms of, dealing with them because, for instance, extrajudicial killings raises a lot of questions of human rights. But we have to be intentional and purposeful as a country in confronting these gangs as the only way to eliminate them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ahmed Hashi.
Well, Dibal, there's an author who wrote a book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And the people in this society and in this country do not become criminals by choice. You can understand the language of law and order by my colleagues that we ought to stamp those things out, and I agree with them to a certain extent. But the infrastructure of life in our country kind of social diseases. There's no, there's absolutely no question in my mind that law and order has to be maintained, and people who do such things have to be dealt with the security forces. But I think it's important for us to make sure that police officers on the ground in Kisauni are also people who are employed from Kisauni, people who understand the culture, people who understand the gangs, people who understand the way of life in the coast. I think it's important that the people themselves of Mombasa confront this problem. It has happened before, as my colleagues have said, and I think that there's no excuse whatsoever in my mind for you to take a machete and harm 14, 15-year-old kids because of any issues. Just not acceptable. However, policing and how you do security as well is really important. Those neighborhoods have to be organized so they can get some kind of community policing. If there was presence of a police inside those neighborhoods at certain times, this will deter these people from doing such things. The intelligence ought to know what's going on in these neighborhoods, because they should have paid informants in those neighborhoods so that Kenyans don't lose life unnecessarily. So I think it's important that the police learn something from this, and moving ahead, that they take remedial measures to stop this from happening again.
So this is just a resumption of a group that has been there for quite a while, but we don't know right now what, if it's economically instigated, if joblessness that you're talking about, or what is really, you know, prompting this sudden flash of, you know, attacks in, down at the coast, Ambassador.
I want to take a slightly different perspective from what Ahmed has said when it comes to triggers of, or the enablers of such kind of gangs. Yes, you can have discontent on matters that have not been settled, particularly if there are disputes whether it's land or whatever it is. You could also be faced with the economic aspects, like he put it, but it could also be some social aspects of life where you have this, you can see that one thing that is in common, that they are on drugs. But I still go back to the security architecture of this country.
Yes.
And to say what we have always stated in this forum, that if indeed the parents know, and if the parents know, then it's not so difficult even for security to have this information. Something is going to miss. And I would still urge those in security to revisit this thing and organize it, because poverty is always going to be with us.
Yes.
Drugs are going always to be with us. And the only thing then is to organize the society in a way that you can be able to particularly get information, but also address it. And I don't think that we can just sit back and say, okay, this is a serious issue. It is doable. But let's revisit the security architecture, particularly what we call the Nyumba Kumi. I still insist it has not been properly thought out. Let it involve the counties. You can have various layers of security. This aspect of saying the security is a state preserve is not right. All of us should be concerned. As a citizen, if I know my child is involved, I should be taken to task. You knew all this time. What did you do? And I think we need to educate the society. There's a lot more that we can do to stem this kind of thing.
Professor Nomi Dambo.
The ball, I was in a Kigali hotel on my way to the airport, and there was only one drunk person on our way. And the driver said that in less than 1 minute he would be picked. And indeed he was picked and put in a vehicle, and they drove away with him. I did not see any gangster or hear about gangster. I did not fear walking at 11 o'clock in Kigali. And that is now becoming common. My partners have touched on a number of things, and that is very, very important. Hasi talked about law and order. We must have law and order. And the ambassador talked about our ability to be able to control that kind of situation. Most of us done a lot of research in this area and understand. Here's my point about. Yes, there is economic opportunity problem. Yes, there is lack of employment among youth in the country. Yes, there is a breakdown of family values, what we need to do. There is a breakdown of church leadership.
Yes.
That bring value, which center on what we need to do. And there is opportunists like politicians who organize gangs to beat up their opponents, or drug dealers who organize a cartel and use these young people. We all know that. We all know what other countries have done to curtail this kind of behavior. And the most important thing, is we must have law and order in this country. And we must use enough intelligence. We must use our apparatus of law enforcement to ensure that every neighborhood is safe, and we cannot go to bed and be safe. Until that is done, we cannot develop without that. We must have rapid expansion of opportunities, education, employment, what have you, reinforcement of family value, getting rid of corruption of all its kind in this country, and increasing the role of church and community leadership, quality leadership. This must happen. And I know we have the ability to do it. We have the largest economy in East Africa compared to Rwanda. And Rwanda is a small country, but they are able to do it.
All right. Well, let's also just pick up that particular editorial cartoon on the Daily Nation. That's page 12. This is just in relation to what we're actually talking about. Maybe your panelists could also weigh in on this particular editorial cartoon. You can see it over there. That is the governor and the gang in between, and also the police. Dr. Mustafa.
Dibal, you know, security is not a devolved function, so let me start with that.
Yes.
The responsibility for ensuring
Correct.
that there is security in any part of this country rests with the national government.
Yes.
Secondly, I think our
So does
government...
that mean also the county government has no play when it comes?
No,
if it's
I'm coming to that.
All right.
I'm coming. So secondly, our county governments must work on programs that ensure the young people, jobs are created, our young people are kept busy, and that those groups that are created are not taken advantage of politically. Remember, Wakali Kwanza actually was established in 2014 as a football club.
Oh, it was a football club.
It was a football club. It drew the best talents of the young people in various villages and pockets in Kisauni area. And somehow these groups that are created, something happens to them, and they veer off the values for which they were created. It's just like Mungiki. Mungiki's creation, it was a social group, a social movement that was supposed to help and take care of women who were internally displaced in Molo. And then it metamorphosed into something else because of conditions that are there. And therefore, politicians have a role in ensuring that these groups do not, the groups that are created for good reasons and for good purposes, do not metamorphose into something else like Wakali Kwanza and Mungiki did indeed metamorphose into. So politicians, governors, officials from the national government have a big role to play. Dibal, corruption is going to kill this country. I think we've talked about that. A lot of monies that are supposed to go into youth programs. We're just seeing that the Car Sober program that was initiated by Ferdinand Waititu, it was actually corrupted by the very people who initiated such a good program. And so a program that is supposed to keep young people out of alcoholism, up to 1 billion Kenya shillings spent, most of it stolen. And the young people will ask, you know, what is this that is going on in this country? And therefore they will resort into this, into criminal activities. Of course, can never be justified. And these groups have got to be brought to book based on what the IGP said. And they have to prevent these groups from doing what they are doing, creating panic and terrorizing people.
Right. Okay, your comments, Hashi, on the editorial cartoon?
I agree that that the security function is not devolved, and that it should be a central government issue, but representation should be devolved. People from the ground, and people from an area should be able to work in the security services
Yes.
because they understand the situation better. So that's a critical point. The ball, you know, it's macabre it's cartoons that depict these kinds of things that happen in our society. And I just think that we are probably going to see more of these things than less of it. We're probably going to be seeing, as we approach the general elections, problems with our security. We're going to see problems emerging when the paramount chieftains of this country start putting their blocks together. And I think that it's really important that the police services and the intelligence services are really helped and enabled to understand by some of our experts who are sitting here on what's going on in this country and how they can really get to the bottom of crime and punishment in Kenya.
All right, so at the tail end, we have the police there who is actually, is it holding some monies there? Is it showcasing maybe the corruption that is ongoing as far as security is concerned?
Pathetic,
Yeah.
It's really pathetic.
Okay, Nomi Damba.
The ball, our constitution allow both the national government and local government to devolve either all or part of their responsibility. And the ball, I believe that there is no group called government that can sit back and say we have no responsibility at all. When gangsters are terrorizing people in Mombasa, the county of Mombasa ought to be directly responsible together with the national government and ought to understand the source of this kind of thing. At the ball, we need discipline among our disciplined forces. We need to call all those that are, like that picture that I've seen. They have no business being there. They are supposed to be protecting us. We are supposed to be paying for them. And we ought to weed them out, the bad guys. We ought to weed them out and put them in prison.
Thank you. Right, Hassan Khanenja?
We have a tendency to wait until things get out of hand before we act, or at least react. And I think if we move away from reactionary approaches to solving problems, it's going to be better. As I think Dr. Mustafa was discussing, the groups and the gangs at the coast have been around for actually several years. They are known virtually by everybody. They are known by the communities within which they are known by families. They are known, they've been written about it, they've been published about it. Why now? Why do we have to wait until it gets to this stage for us to start doing that? So I think the approach should be proactive. We should be able to nip them in the bud as they start springing up. Because we know how it always ends up. We know Mungiki started just as some kind of social, political, religious gathering, and then it turned out into just some murderous gang. And so any gang, unless it's for social welfare and they're doing something extremely, extremely good, positive to the country, no, it should not be allowed.
Okay. Right, Ambassador Rasas Moicha, finally.
Well, I think the title of the cartoon said it all. Says
Order
it all.
of priorities.
Order of priorities. To me, one of the most important aspects of the state is to provide security. Without security, you cannot have development. And society is left anxious. We'll be discussing this matter of the US to see an angry nation. And or a nation that cannot even, because I can see where the governor is being pulled in, because who is going to invest in Mombasa if this kind of thing is happening? And so there is a challenge for all of us. And that's why I think we still go back and say, let us not segment security. Security should be for everybody. Everybody be concerned. And I think the governors themselves should organize their own houses and confront it. Because it is not simply going to have police or guns that can stop it. It also means organizing the society to understand their social needs, economic needs, and start addressing them, or at least be there with them and empathize with them.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much.